Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And when it comes to news in EVE Online, there's actually one item that is pretty interesting. It was actually a forum post, if I'm not mistaken, that talked about changes that CCP is planning for the aggressive behavior of drones, and they will no longer automatically attack NPCs at one point in the game. That's a change that they are planning. It's honestly also a change that has been discussed like for a pretty long time, I would say, amongst the player base. Not that this will actually completely destroy bots or anything like that. It might help a little bit for the lazier bots, but overall an extra button press doesn't tend to be a problem for them. And so quite a few players actually consider that to be something that is going to lower the ease of use for EVE Online. It's like a counterintuitive quality of life change, or a counter quality of life change to the game. For me personally, it's not going to be too much of a problem. I do tend to split out my drone damage manually anyways, but from time to time, when I don't want to mine as a more passive way of playing EVE Online, what I do is that I take either the Ishtar or a Hila or something like that into anomalies, and I just chain them, and what I tend to do is I just run into the anomaly, drop my drone's probe for the signatures that are around there. I don't find anything, I pull everything back, and by the time I'm done, usually my drones have cleaned up the site. That will no longer be possible, so a slightly passive playstyle that I do from time to time will be countered by this change that CCP has announced. Overall, the goal is to make things more interactive, right? You have to be a bit more active to play EVE Online, so that the efforts that players put into the game increase in value. I think that's also part of the idea behind this change. Slightly controversial, but I personally think that we'll basically get used to that pretty quickly. Every other weapon system requires targeting, clicking, or using a shortcut or something like that anyway. So I think this will be absorbed pretty quickly, and people will get used to that. But it's gonna be a change that will impact the way a lot of players play EVE Online, because a lot of ships actually use drones, and quite often, as like a side weapon, you also just deploy them and then let them do their thing. So that's gonna change. Pretty interesting. We'll see what it's like when it hits CC or when it comes to DQ, of course. That's pretty much it for what I remember for news. So let's take a quick look at the New Eden store here and look at the services. So we have some sales. Look at that. Omega Time, 30-day Omega Time plus a free rattlesnake skin. Okay, so for a second there I thought it was a free rattlesnake, a free hull. That would be very bad, but it's just a skin that goes now for 500 Plex, and MPTC plus free Stradio skins goes for 485. And there's basically also, I think it's gonna be like on the website or something like that, a 15% sale happening on Plex themselves at the moment. That should have an impact on the market, but yeah, if you basically want an extra skin and you let's see if I can see which one it is. So it should be the Rattlesnake Red Claw stable skin. Alright, looks pretty good. I think it's gonna be the same one, yeah, on the Stradios. I honestly think it looks better on the Stradios than on the Rattlesnake, so pretty interesting. Yeah, for this week you get some pretty cheap Omega Time, not just through this, but also through the cheaper Plex. So that means that we are going to move on to the market, of course, and as always we'll start with Plex and stuff. That's coming in at 410. Like that. Alright, and let's see if we can see an impact. Here is the chart for Plex in Jita. Here's the volume spike, of course, and then the daily averages going down substantially. This is normal, right? This is a CCP Plex sale that the player base is taking advantage of, and you can see that it's been a while, basically, I would say, that we really have seen a Plex sale, and so the players are going pretty wild in the volumes here. Next up, 2.78 million for the sellers in Jita, less than 2.7 million for the buyers. So there's a bit of pressure, but it's not that much in the price. It's just volumes, a little bit of pressure on that price, but no one is really going to like 2.5 or below 2.5 or anything like that. There's quite a bit of competition, and basically, I would say quite a bit of demand, quite a few people that are just saying, all right, we can still buy below 2.8 million. That's maybe something we should try to take advantage of, and they're doing exactly that. In the player-owned trade hubs, we should see probably a little bit more competition, but no, look at that. Actually, just below 2.8 million there for the sellers, and then the buyers are going up just a touch as well, staying below 2.7 million. So there is pressure on the price. It is very clear that this is all due to the Plex sale, and considering the volume spike that I'm seeing here, it's actually a surprisingly low amount of pressure, I would say. And my read on this is that there is very strong demand for Plex at the moment, and people willing to basically buy below 2.8, 2.75 million and consider that a good investment. I'm personally not entirely sure, right? It's pretty obvious that ISK generation is in the crosshairs for CCP now for rebalancing, and if they want to fight inflation this way, this could not be good news for Plex prices if you want them to go up. But we will see how that evolves, of course. The multiple pilot train certificate follows suit as well. Volume spike that is not as noticeable here on the smaller volumes that we have, but it's been there for a couple of days, and so the price under pressure towards 1.3 billion. It is actually below 1.3 billion for the first sellers. In Jita, still up there, almost 1.4, and then the buyers are going for just above 1.2 billion ISK. So a bit of pressure to be seen here as well. Skill extractors. Here we don't have the volume spike, but we do see today's daily average being below. So we were actually working our way towards 320 million on the average price, and now we're down to 310. Buyers coming in at 304, super narrow margin here, which to me is that exact same thing again. You probably have more supply through that Plex sale that's coming in, that's putting pressure on the sell prices, but the buyers are there as well. They're willing to grab skill extractors for less than 305 million, probably preparing for better times. And this is really for people with, I think, a longer horizon, because at the moment it is the holidays, we've got these events, we got lots of SP that is being given to the player base, but who knows if that stops after the holiday season. Springtime and maybe early summer could be very interesting, of course, when it comes to skill extractors and then skill injectors. The turnaround could, of course, happen at some point. After that, we have the injectors. Here are the large scale injectors that are, well, we're already at the 1 year low point, slight bounce on no real volume, and then right now, of course, we are probably gonna see a little bit more pressure on that as well. 650 as the reference, yeah, 658 million for the sellers, 635 million for the buyers. Clearly, again, some pressure with here even buyers going down a little bit as my first intuition. I may be a little bit wrong on that. There may already have been a slightly larger margin between sellers and buyers, but I would say if you consider buying large scale injectors below 650, considering this chart as a good investment, this is definitely going to be your time to still try and snag that investment, because of course part of these sellers will see increased pressure from the Plex sale as well. Small scale injectors have the very same pattern, so 1 year low point touching on 130 million is what we saw probably 10 days ago or something like that. We're at 133 million for the sellers, 126 million for the buyers. So again, if you want that small scale injector investment below 130 million, this is your chance to try to do so. You'll have to be probably slightly aggressive with your buy order, but considering what's happening in Plex and with the extractors, I would say that there is bound to be enough pressure on the sellers here as well, that some of them will be impatient and will just take that couple million extra, or maybe just 1 million extra that you're giving, and that you will be able to trigger a buy order pretty easily in this period of time. So that's the skill injectors. We still have the daily alpha injectors, and oh my god, confirming that trend, that counter trend right there. Regular injectors made from Plex, made from SP, created by the players is down to 1 year low points. You're able to buy those really cheaply. Daily alpha injectors, 1 year high point, pulling away from the 45 million ISK range. 48 million almost for the sellers, 43.5 million for the buyers. So sellers able to dominate the price here as well this week. Very, very interesting, I would say. Again, volumes are starting to dwindle, well, not to nothingness, but they're definitely down a little bit on these higher prices. But it shows that who's playing as alpha clones are, willing to put in the time to earn that ISK to get those daily alpha injectors, and that they're very popular with the alpha clones at the moment. There's high competition because there is that very high price for them. Pretty impressive stuff compared to everything else basically in this section so far. We have the hypercores left that are slowly edging back toward the 300,000 average range, to 90,000 for the sellers, 263 for the buyers. Again, I say this almost every week, but like you could see this as a slight barometer in activity in the game. Then we're definitely up from the summer where we were hovering around the 280 price. Now we're at the 300,000 price. Not super big, but percentage wise it's probably significant enough. It's gonna be interesting to see how this evolves through the winter. Perhaps if real life situations could also actually put some pressure on the activities in the game. Maybe the war in Nelsik could see a conclusion at some point. I'm not sure, of course. But if that slows down, that could lower population, and then you can imagine something like a vaccine that would allow people to go do more outside stuff. Let's see if the hypercore becomes a barometer for that or not. Next up, the minerals coming in at 1120. There we go. As always, we will start with titanium, and you may have seen that on the ticker already. We still have a little bit of pressure on the price of titanium, but it is definitely stalling its descent at this point. We're talking in JITA 685, so around 6.9 ISK for the sellers, 643 for the buyers. We're definitely below 7 ISK. We're basically back on what I would call a historical average price for titanium. Not great, not bad. So definitely lost a lot of its premium from the change that titanium would become solely or almost solely producible from HiSec. And we've also seen what happens with Ital, seen what happens, or what has at least been reported in a lot of HiSec systems where NOSIC and LOSIC groups are actually trying to assert their dominance there. They do war deck people, they don't want any free ports in there, they want their own sources of titanium, and so they're basically establishing themselves. Perhaps they're recruiting, right, specialized corporations that do mining as efficiently as possible in HiSec so that they have their own resources. In general, there has definitely been an increased focus on mining in HiSec since NOSIC has been really nerfed very, very badly, at least from what has been reported there. And as a result, mining in HiSec is now dominating mining in EVE Online compared to a year ago. That is completely different situation, and so titanium is the first casualty, losing all of the gains, no longer going for 10 ISK but for a far more normal 6 to 7 ISK at the moment. For pyrite, we are stopping our ascent, but at a pretty nice price range, 17.5 ISK on the chart. It's actually 17.5 for the sellers, 1640 for the buyers, so a little bit of margin opening up. And I think here we may be suffering from two problems. The first one is going to be the same thing as titanium. Increased activity, increased mining in HiSec is going to be increasing supplies. And perhaps if I look at these numbers, 50 million, 50 million, 76 million, 66 million, 46 million, I think now that the price increase has stopped, that there are still some final reserves from the good old resource bonanza that will try to find new owners. It's of course gonna be a pretty nice premium for whoever bought like a year ago for 5 ISK or mined like a year ago for 5 ISK. You know, that's gonna feel like, all right, I'm really getting the most out of my pyrite at the moment. And so we could get slumped a little bit, so we will probably see a little bit of a pullback. But what I like is that, considering what's happened to titanium and what pyrite, a little bit of a pullback is probably normal, considering what's happening with like Tick 1 battleship prices and things like that. That may not be a bad thing, and overall will probably stabilize reasonably historically accurate, I would say. Pyrite has historically always been more expensive than titanium, so there is some room to push this back to maybe the 14-15 ISK range, maybe even 12 on a little bit too much supply, and then we will find that balance back afterwards as well. Mining activity, of course, might decrease a little bit as well when efficiency starts to drop in high sec, and it becomes more and more enticing to go to low sec, to go to null sec, and to do some mining there, or to try to do some mining there. After that, we have the Mexalon chart, and that's a little bit unexpected and actually very impressive. A jump up to 1 year high point above 125. We're talking 122 now for the seller, so a little bit of fresh supply in the last couple of days has dropped that price back down from 127 to 122. But it's not that much, it's in the millions. 20 million here, 20 million here, there. Definitely absorbable by the market. Buyers are at 113, so they haven't budged just yet, but it does look like there is quite a bit of competition happening for Mexalon, which, you know, has always been able to maintain its price very well. Basically also being a sort of a bottleneck in nullsec, not super pronounced, but it was always there before the resource bonanza, that it was the first mineral, or even during the resource bonanza times, that it was one of the first minerals that nullsec would run out of, would have to import from somewhere else if they wanted to basically keep going or keep scaling up their local industry. And that may be the case here now again, with Mexalon becoming the new winner basically for HiSec, right? HiSec focusing on titanium, pyrite and Mexalon. If you get a choice, definitely grab something that has Mexalon in it. And I think this was also confirmed from one of you by an email from one of you guys. I'm getting quite a few emails, so forgive me if I can't answer all of them or even remember all of them, but it was basically said that you no longer want to mine Veldspar just for titanium. You actually want to go for, was it Plague class or something like that, that actually holds Mexalon because of the pullback of titanium and well, the late gains still for Mexalon. So that's definitely a switch. Try to focus on that for now. After that, we've got Isogen that is still struggling a little bit, I would say. I would have hoped that we would at least be able to maintain a price range of 50 ISK, but that's not the case. We're going down towards 40 ISK now. 44 for the sellers and 38 for the buyers. Alright, what I am going to say though is that for the first time in a long time, we are definitely seeing the volumes drop. We still have one order at 45 or 50 million units, but below that 10 is the biggest, 6, 5, 8. So this to me is the first sign that perhaps the old stocks are also starting to be sold and starting to be depleted. There's going to be some exceptions, just like with pyrite. I'm definitely suspecting that there's some patient investors or hoarders out there that are coming out of the woodworks now, and that there may still be reserves out there waiting for Isogen to go back up in price to even higher points. Again, that historical perspective, Isogen used to always be more expensive than Mexalon. If you keep that in mind, that may be happening, but at least those willing to take the current profits seem to be drying up, and these volumes are definitely lower from, I would say, like the last month or so. So that's a good sign for this decrease to start stopping. Perhaps this yo-yo could finally end and we could then start to see an upwards movement. That would be my personal expectation. I may, of course, be wrong on that. After that, we've got the Noxium chart that is normalizing towards 1000 ISK. So this was a pretty damn strong performance. Still 4 times the price of the start of Noxium at the start of the year. So it's going for a bit above 1000 ISK for the sellers, 930 for the buyers. Volume-wise, nothing too much out of the ordinary here. So this is again, I would say, just like with titanium, a little bit of a settling of the situation in EVE Online after all of these changes. I'm pretty sure that there are now low-sec groups that are organizing their mining. This is, I mean, this is a pretty damn nice extra income that they can make there. Perhaps Nelsec groups trying to really get to do everything and anything, and that means that whoever does manage to get that Noxium at the moment that's not part of these groups, well, will find themselves with a market with a little bit less demand, and so they have to lower their prices a touch. On the Zydrine market, we're also losing some feathers. Okay, I kind of thought we would be able to maintain the range of 1250. My thinking is Nullsec much more organized, and you know, you need to import this stuff now into GTA 4.4 to sell it. So there is this dominant position from the sellers here that should allow them to dictate the price. But eventually, competition does tend to win out. Of course, a little bit above 1200 is for the sellers, and just below 1200 for the buyers. So very you know, basically you could say strong demand, but it's exactly what I was talking about. The sellers are dictating the price here. No one is dumping to these buyers, so they have to go super low, super close to the buy price in order to sometimes snag someone that perhaps has reprocessed a lot of loot, has got some Zydrine and wants to dump it right away. But from the big sellers, from the real producers, no, they're all putting up sell orders. And there does seem to be a little bit of competition coming in on that front now as well. Perhaps a stabilization in some regions of Nullsec, or again the establishment of you know, the influence circles that some of these bigger groups actually want. And so now everything is starting to get up and running, and so yeah, that Zydrine income is probably going to be part of part of that. And right now, you know, as things stabilize, they're probably able to sell at a slightly lower price. And then we still have our other oddball out here. Just like I would say, Isogen and Megasite are our two minerals that are not behaving exactly the way I would expect, considering what all the others are doing. And here we get Megasite pulling back quite quickly towards 600 ISK here. So we're talking 620 for the sellers and just below 600 ISK for the buyers. Again, really narrow margin between sellers and buyers, and that is because most of this stuff comes from Nullsec now, so the sellers do dictate the price, but it looks like they're willing to drop very quickly over the matter of just a couple of weeks to the 620 range, which to me still doesn't make too much sense. Megasite, in my opinion, should be a lot closer to Zydrine. At least historically speaking, it was even slightly more expensive than Zydrine, so I don't have a good explanation for why it's half the price of a, in my opinion, comparable mineral. Perhaps there are some sources out there, perhaps Bogven, perhaps other stuff that I'm not fully aware of, but at the moment this is the situation. I would say Megasite really weird, and I don't think it's massive reserves. Isogen still struggling. I would say that is likely due to reserves. If you look at this though, then they may be starting to dry up. So it's going to be interesting in the upcoming weeks to see how all of this evolves. Of course, for now, I'm basically seeing a settling down of the mineral market as the changes have been absorbed. The player base is starting to adapt. Some, high-sec free ports have been raised, and now the supply chains are basically coming online. Next up, then, the PI market, 2210. Let's see if with a stabilization of the mineral market we are also seeing some more ISK flow back into PI. I'm not sure, I think that would be a little bit too early, and for now broadcast notes are kind of confirming that it's too early. Another step down to another 1 year low point below 1.25 million, 1.2 million in fact for an aggressive seller, just below 1.2 million for the buyers. So finally buyers are saying, you know, 1.2 million, start of the year 2 million, that does start to look pretty juicy. So they are starting to put up some buy orders here, a little bit of risk flowing into the market, but it is obviously at very, very low price points. Next up, we've got our construction blocks continuing to struggle at the 7,500 ISK range, so 7.6 for the sellers, 7,100 for the buyers. Decently, well, normal margin for this price range, I would say, but it's still there, and it's on the downside. Consumer electronics, another leg down, 1 year low point, 6,250 on some days, 7,000 excuse me for the sellers, 6,500 for the buyers. Next up, I'm gonna go through this decently quickly, I think, because unfortunately I'm not seeing a lot of ISK flow into the market here all of a sudden. Coolants is also just staying above the 7,500 ISK range, 7.6 for the sellers, 7.1 for the buyers. Not that much demand, again, not a lot of ISK flowing into this. I would say for coolants, right, compare that to to like consumer electronics that's now falling off to less than 7,000 disk here, it's not that bad, and that there is still this one advantage of PI materials tied to fuels, that is that there is consumption. It's probably pretty low at the moment with what's happening, people losing their structures, and with the cores it's a lot harder, a lot more risky to put them up, more costly as well. There's going to be lower demand, but there is still consumption, and that should allow things to basically stay, I think, in a slightly better range than, for instance, consumer electronics that I think historically have always been more expensive than coolants, slightly harder to produce. Coolants 10,000 disk, 10,500 normal average. So I would say that for now my hope is I'm actually still producing in detail with coolants, with mechanical parts, that the losses there will be less, that will have a narrower price band, and so that producing that stuff will still be the best choice longer term. Cryoprotectant Solutions is landing on 100,000 disk. It's either because people are very careful here or they listen to me and they're following my thoughts on the strategy. 102,000 for the sellers, 90,000 for the buyers. Considering this average price, it's very difficult to grab these cryoprotectant solutions for close to 90,000 disk, but this is tied to implants. This is really the one thing where on the longer term you have an outlook for a jump because of new implants being introduced into the game. And so I would say if you can buy below 100,000 disk, you're basically ready for that eventual information to drop from CCP, where they're saying, hey, here are our Eden conversion implants, not for the disintegrator but for the photon projector. You're gonna see a jump, you're gonna make a profit, but you want to buy at the right time, and right now it looks like that is keeping this market up. Enriched uranium is flat for the last month or so, but again, very difficult to produce and tied to fuels. So I would say that that is perhaps what is made containing the losses now to 9,000 for the sellers and 8,800 for the buyers. Integrity response drones, yeah, there is no stopping it, heading towards a price below 1.5 million on average, 1.6 million for the sellers, 1.44 million for the buyers. That means that people are dumping at the moment straight to these buyers. That is quite different, right, from, I would say, cryoprotectant solutions, and to a certain extent from PI tied to fuels as well, when it is not clear that you have this consumption, and it is tied to structures, for instance. Yeah, it's dumping time for some people. Next to that, we've got a mechanical parts chart that is actually not confirming my theory. You would hope that mechanical parts would, for instance, be able to stay at that 8,000 disk range, but no, this one is dropping off quite sharply. 7,000 all of a sudden for the sellers, 6,800 for the buyers. So not a great choice for me to still be making mechanical parts at the moment, but this is the gamble that I'm taking. I'm kind of hoping that there is going to be this better range for mechanical parts than most of the other stuff. Nanites tied to implants is trying to defend 5,000. This couple of days just below that. So here 5,100 for the sellers, 4,900 for the buyers. Yeah, aggressive buying here, but below 5k. I understand that if you want to be ready for, again, an implant announcement, you want some nanites below 5k. Nano factories went to 1 year low point, slight bounce here, but very, very carefully. Investors staying below 750,000, 740 for the sellers, 639 for the buyers. That is super low, and so you can see 1 year low point, slight volume increase, but they're just not gonna push the price back to 1 million or anything like that. They're really just grabbing the cheapest stuff, and you can understand why they're so careful, because with broadcast notes, right, people may have thought, hey, that those were some pretty good purchases below 1.5 million, and now the market is saying, no, you actually bought a falling knife, we're going even lower. And who knows, same thing could happen here as well. Organic mortar applicators, a lot more flat at that low point below 800,000 disk, 800 for the sellers, 710, 712,000 disk for the buyers. Very, very large margin for something that is this low on the chart. Recursive computing module, flat on its low point here as well. 1 million for the sellers, 900,000 for the buyers. Starts the year at above 1.5 million. Robotics tied to fuels, and yeah, the bad news continues here again. So you have that same thing, right? We did below 70,000 disk, volume increase, and investors making a move towards, well, let's say below 75,000, and then the market says bad choice, we're going down to 65. 68,000 for the sellers, 62,000 for the buyers. Self-harmonizing power cores back on the 1-year low point here again as well. So that's you gotta be very careful with PI at the moment, I have to say. I would honestly focus on the implant stuff. I think that's your best bet. But here, self-harmonizing power cores goes down to a 1.3 million 1-year low point. You have investors moving in, pushing the price back to 1.5 million, and look at that, we're back down to less than 1.3 million for the sellers, 1.2 million for the buyers, back down, breaking that 1-year low point there. Sterile conduits, again, that seesaw movement, right? Oh, that looks great, below a million. Nope, 900,000. Nope, now we're below 900,000. So, you know, you gotta be careful. It's very difficult to buy at the right time. 924 for the sellers, 821 for the buyers. So still like a 10% margin between sellers and buyers, despite the fact that we're at the low point on the chart. It's just suffering from not enough ISK flowing into the market. You come in superconductors, right? If you look at this 1-year chart, an exception, we again have a February-March spike that's tied to implants. So this is where, you know, people are still pouring some ISK into it. And for me, that's still too early. 67 for the sellers, 61 for the buyers. I'm looking at less than 50K before I jump in here. And then we get with where mainframes, that's back at a 1-year low point yet again. Less than 1.5 million for the sellers, and 1.3 million for the buyers. Yeah, poor PI markets. This is basically what's happening, and you know, you get it. You have to be careful. Everything that CCP is doing development-wise is towards rewarding players that actively play the game, that actively take risks as well. You know, the passive stuff is really something that I think CCP at the moment is saying, if that goes down in value, we don't mind. That's actually part of the plan. And so for PI at the moment, yeah, you know, you're still just, I'm still doing the exact same thing. Once every 24 hours, I come online, I activate my injectors, and once every couple of weeks, maybe even once a month or something like that, I empty out my planets. And that's not the stuff that CCP says doing that is going to, and doing that like the smart way, is going to basically pay for your subscription. They're definitely getting away from that, and that's the impact that we're seeing on the PI market at the moment. It's going to be very hard, I think, on a single account to now plex your account through PI only. All right, advanced moon materials coming in at 3120. Here, of course, oh, I'm actually gonna grab some water. There we go. Here, of course, I think that we get other forces that are stabilizing it, not just CCP saying if it's passive, we don't want it, basically. And so advanced movements, I think, you know, Nelsec political situation is a big deal there, and then probably as well just the lack of ISK here. So let's get started with crystalline carbonite for Galente, landing on the 140 ISK range, a little bit below average, I would say. 144 for the sellers, 129 for the buyers. I think this confirms, you know, what I'm trying to say here. Sellers, there's regular supplies, things are maybe even stabilizing a little bit in Nelsec, and so we go down in price from some high points. But the real problem is the big gap between sellers and buyers, the lack of demand basically. So sellers are at around an average, but buyers are trying to drive the price down below average, which is exactly what's happening on some days for the average price on the chart. Next up, we have Caldari nonlinear metamaterials. Nope, it's not metamaterials that I'm looking for. It's this titanium carbide. Ouch, and that's a pretty big drop off to a 1-year low point all of a sudden. 139 for the sellers, 130 for the buyers. Some 13 million units here that are probably going to cause a problem. So this is a 1-year low point, but 140, so this does just put this material, titanium carbide, in range of Galente, and in the last couple of weeks this was really what we had been seeing, is that for Caldari moon materials you were paying a pretty big premium. So it could just be that this is a pretty heavy cliff, but that this is just a normalization and that this will become the new range for titanium carbide. After that, we have our 3.1 Fernite carbide for Minmatar production. That's under pressure even more than that. Also 1 year low point, 115 for the sellers, 103 for the buyers. And here it's very obvious that it's a lack of demand that is causing this price crash for Fernite carbide. And then finally, we've got tungsten carbide for Amar. That's also on a 1 year low point. But again, the 140 range. So this one was always a premium as well. Not as pronounced as Caldari, but 149 now for the sellers, 137 for the buyers. We basically have right now a lot of pressure on this raw material. And I would say Caldari, Galente, Amar coming in line with each other at the 140 range. And then Minmatar, the least popular one at the moment, is crashing well below those. But across the board, pressure. And I'm not sure that we'll see a pretty big comeback anytime soon towards like average price of 175 for tungsten carbide for Amar, or for Caldari here, same thing, a 170 range. I don't see it happening too soon at this point. Next up here, we have the second leg, which is, let's look for Galente. There we go. Photonic metamaterials. Now, I would also say, finally, we do see things coming together on both of these levels. Also, clearly a lot of pressure and hovering at a 1 year low point region. 11,000 for the sellers, 9,700 for the buyers. Then we again have nonlinear metamaterials for Caldari. That was the oddball out. That was way more expensive, twice the price of the Galente ones, but here the pressure is mounting as well, so we're heading for a 1 year low point. It's still 18,000 for the sellers, 16,500 for the buyers. I would be careful here. I would not be surprised if pressure keeps mounting. After that, we've got Minmatar. Here is plasmonic metamaterials. Yeah, same thing here. More and more pressure driving the price back down. 13,000 for the sellers, 12,000 for the buyers. So heading in that Galente range. And then finally for Amar, here it is, terahertz metamaterials. Yeah, 1 year low point as well. More and more pressure building. 13,500 for the sellers, 12,600 for the buyers. So the story is that after a little bit of volatility, probably I would say because of the fall of Niaja, when people were trying to look for, am I going to move everything to Cheetah, should I move to Amar, where am I going to sell, this type of stuff, that we had some pretty big differences, and really the ones that were holding on well was Caldari here with 22,500 just about a month ago. That was pretty damn impressive and was like, okay, this is still different from everything else, but now this week we obviously have pressure across the board in all categories of advanced moon materials, which is going to put even more pressure, I think, on Tech 2 ship prices, because they should be becoming cheaper and cheaper to produce as well. We still have the other stuff that was basically sort of predicting what was going to happen here, because all of that has been under pressure for quite a bit. Here is fermionic condensates. Its new range, 60 to 70,000 ISK. Yeah, it's 66 for the sellers, 58,000 in fact for the buyers, and clearly currently trading below the entire chart. Ferrogel, actually a little bit of a comeback, but let's keep things in mind here. We started here at 40,000 ISK for an average price, and then here since August we've got this steady drop down. We went down to 29,000 pretty much, a bounce up to 33,000 ISK, and 31 for the buyers is not necessarily a great comeback story. After that, we've got fullerite confirming the continued pressure, moving down to a less than 625 range, 610 for the sellers, 530 for the buyers. They're going even lower on this one as well. This to me means that a little bit of a bounce, but could go back down very quickly here. Hypersynaptic fibers trading below 10,000 ISK, bars below 9,000 ISK, nanotransistors, just the 4,000 ISK range, and even here at the tail end we have more and more pressure building, so it's less than 4,000 for the sellers, 3,200 for the buyers. The ISK just isn't there, so it's the lack of demand that is really pushing prices to much lower ranges. Phenolic composites was already struggling throughout the summer and is basically now at 1,500 for the sellers, 1,400 for the buyers. That's phenolics. that's this. And so finally we also have ceramic fibers that is yeah, flat at a 300 ISK range, 350 to 400 at the start of the year, 327 for the sellers, but 290 for the buyers. Sellers are trying, but the buyers just don't have the ISK. There's no interest in the market at the moment, and that is putting more and more pressure on these prices. And yeah, I don't see a quick end to this, to be honest. And so as a result, I do fear that a lot of these are going to start moving in these new lower ranges as well. And so if, for instance, you're looking at these Caldari non-linear metamaterials, you're seeing buyers coming in at 16,500, and then you're seeing high points above 23,000 ISK, and you're thinking this is a great deal. I personally would give that same warning as with PI. Don't catch the falling knife. It is very risky at the moment. Let's see if there's an impact on the Tech 2 ships next at 39.30. Like that, and let's get started here with the Basilisk. Alright, able to maintain a decently high price range of 230 million ISK, 225 for the sellers, 209 for the buyers. If you still happen to have bought some below 200 million ISK, you can still try to make a little bit of ISK on that. But it's really not budging too much. Volatility seems to be going down, but at a high range, which is quite unusual. Cerberus is also landing on the 230 million range, which I would say is normal average price, 238 for the sellers, 208 for the buyers. It's also a very, very useful platform for a lot of the events that CCP tends to organize, especially in high sec. It's got a great tank, great damage application, very easy to guide this through a lot of the content, and so we do have higher volumes that is basically able to maintain the price on average. After that, we've got the Guardian that is slowly showing signs of more and more pressure, around 180 million ISK landing range. Yeah, 176 now for the sellers, 167 million for the buyers. Definitely very, very cheap, right? We're below the entire chart at this point. We saw what happened last time. You did get a bump up to 230. Will that happen again? Feels quite risky, so I would be very aggressive, in fact, or not aggressive, in fact, with my buy order. I would try to like stay below 170, for instance, right? That would, in my opinion, be a purchase that should yield you a decent return. Yeah, you gotta be aware that, in my opinion, volatility has been dying down a little bit. After that, we've got the Hound, and this one moves a leg down to 20 million ISK, 21.5 million for the sellers, less than 19 million for the buyer of Hounds. So I was still holding some that I bought at 22.5 million. May have been a mistake to not sell when we went above 25 million ISK, but we will see longer term how this works out. Of course, CCP did change these stealth bombers, if I'm not mistaken. My bad, guys. I haven't read the details on exactly what happened with that velocity. I think like torpedoes were changed and stealth bombers were changed in response. And I did write down that there's also change to the Griffin Navy issue. So we are going to take a look at faction frigates as the extra product. But for now, is this the market? Is this the nerf? Or is this the change? It's hard to say, but right now Hounds 1 year low point, very pronounced, buyers below 19 million. We haven't seen that in a very long time. Ikitursa also kind of confirming that pressure, right? Went up to 700 million ISK on Pogven and the lack of availability, and now we have this slight bit of pressure here, 670 for the sellers, 620 for the buyers. The Ishtar, wow, 1 year low point going down to 118 million, 186 for the sellers, 162 for the buyers. Here we do have an explanation. Here's the volume spike, so there's a bit of dumping that was happening. That's probably that forum post, of course, that is going to make you know, those drone platforms less of an easy option for players, for some playstyles, and so the market is reacting to that and is dumping all of its Ishtars, driving the price down to a super pronounced 1 year low point. Cheapest Ishtar in a very long time if you want to buy one. The Manticore, alright, also a lot of pressure on the price, so kind of seeing the advanced boom mats shine through all of this as well, but unlike the Hound, it's not testing new lows here all of a sudden, so that would to me mean that it's not that bad for the stealth bombers. In general, 26 million for the sellers, 25.5 I'm gonna say, and then 23.5 for the buyers. Definitely at the low end of the range for the buy prices as well. Munin is staying well below 200 million here, so more pressure. 188 to 181. All right, slightly aggressive buying, but yeah, if you want to have one right now, then you have to do this, right? This makes sense to me. If you want that Munin and you want to be like 90% sure that you're gonna grab it, go just above 180, and there's probably gonna be someone that's gonna dump one to that buy order. And these here, that's what that's where the real competition lies. Below 180, it's gonna be a little bit harder to do. After that, we've got the Nemesis, same pressure here, but also not a 1-year low point, so I don't think it's a falling off a cliff because of the announcement. 23 million almost for the sellers, 20 million for the buyers. Then we've got the Oneros, basically flat at its low range. Yeah, volumes are just not there. There's days where there's just like one that's being traded. So if you don't have one by now, you can still grab one super cheap Oneros, but I would never buy more than one basically, and wait for something to happen that requires logistics across the board, and then you can probably try to sell that one all of a sudden. You'll need to be fast though. It's not a big market. The Panther, slight uptick, but are we still below 1 billion? Sellers are just above that, buyers are just above 900 million ISK. So not a continued pressure here on production prices, I would say, for now. Purifier counter move up above 25 million. 27 almost for the sellers, 24 million for the buyers. Yeah, that to me does mean that stealth bombers have not been hit too hard when it comes to the changes themselves. I'll have to take a look at the details, but the Hound is basically, yeah, a dump, and could turn out then to be a buy opportunity, right? Because you're buying some really cheap ones, and none of the others are like saying this is just a useless ship now all of a sudden. Next up, we've got the Scimitar going back below 200 million. Yeah, 196 for the sellers, 182 for the buyers. Not great in the volumes, but definitely better than the Oneros. And not at a low point just yet. But are you buying below 180? No, very close to that. Well, we're getting close to another buy opportunity here, but not yet. Then the Widow is also actually jumping up a little bit. 1.1 billion for the sellers, 1 billion for the first buyer as well. And finally the Zealot, that's not doing too well. Staying well below 200, 193 for the sellers, 174 for the buyers. Also a nice margin that's opening up here. So I would say don't panic just yet if you've got Hounds like me. None of the others are like crashing down, so I think that there is still a good chance for a comeback, but it's pretty obvious that Take-Two is under pressure at the moment. Monthly economic numbers also show that this is the index that is suffering a lot at the moment, and yeah, it's basically, I think, not enough ISK that's flowing in here. It's all flowing into minerals and into Take-One, but first signs that this may be stopping and stabilizing in minerals are coming as well. So taking some positions in Take-Two ships could be a good thing to do. I've got some, and I probably bought these way too early. One anomaly, of course, the Ishtar here. That's difficult. That's difficult to say. I would say that this could be a buy opportunity, because generally speaking, the Ishtar, it's still an incredibly versatile ship. It just requires a little bit more effort, and I don't think this was that big of a margin on production costs. So this drop-off could just be a lot of people just dumping Ishtars and extra Ishtars on the market, saying I don't need it anymore because I'm gonna look for an alternative for my ratting activity. But eventually, you know, Ishtar prices at 230 should be a normal price. So I can't be certain of that, but that would be my personal gamble here. This may be a hidden opportunity, despite the fact that nerf usability is changing. It's not like they're nerfing drones, nerfing the Ishtar or anything like that too much. So this one may be the market overreacting to something. Next up, Tech 3 ships coming in at 4810. like that. And so last week we saw that big volume spike for the confessor had driven the price up to 45. Man, how easily this is absorbed. We're back at 40 million on average, 41 for the sellers, 39 for the buyers, so narrow margin. And supply wise, well, last 24 hours, not that much anymore, nothing too outlandish in a single quantity of these orders. So that's very, very impressive that, over the course of 3 days, we went to 3 to 4 times the volumes. We did see a price response, but it was absorbed very, very quickly and efficiently. Next up here, we get the Hecate, which also had a spike, and I think it was proving grounds that may have helped with this spike. But yeah, feels a little bit expensive for a proving ground for me personally, so it may not have been that popular. So here we went up to 50 million ISK, and we are moving back down to 48 million for the sellers, 44 million for the buyers. I would say you're still paying a premium for the Hecate because in PvP situations as a brawler, it just has that damage punch that it received in the latest changes to like brawling munitions and things like that. It's an incredible platform, and it's going for a premium at the moment. Let's see if the supply, yeah, no, not even that much, right? There's a little bit more, like one order of 35 here. That's extra as the confessor, which I would say is perfectly normal considering the current price range, but it's not like it's filled a full page and more in the last 24 hours or anything like that. Actually looks like the market is accepting a Hecate premium for now. Then we've got the Jackdaw, and that one is slowly edging its way up, so saying, I'm not that much worse than a confessor. So we're actually going up here to sellers going for 42 million, buyers at 39.5 million. We do have 500 of these here at 42 million that are probably stabilizing the price here. But other than that, there is some supply in line with everything else and going for 42 million. So basically there is a little bit of a pecking order that I'm seeing. Before this, we often had like, all right, just below 40 million and everyone was there, very happy to be there. But for now, supply-wise across the board, it's not like one is standing out. Perhaps the Hecate is going to draw a little bit more because of that premium, of course. But it looks like they're saying Hecate, yeah, that's definitely the most popular one. Perhaps this is also a great platform for hunting ESS stuff, I think, right? If you're bound to an afterburner, you're bound to that bubble in general, you're probably looking at close range stuff that can be very useful there. So that would be my theory. Perhaps Hecates are very useful for robbing banks in nullsec at the moment. So that one is just going for a premium, regular supply. And then the Jackdaw, I would say PvE platform, auto-targeting missiles, make it a little bit of a boost from all of that stuff as well at this point. And that makes sense that that's going for a little bit more than the confessor at this point. And then we probably have the Zwepel that's going to be that had the big jump because of the proving grounds, is already moving its way back down and is now going for 45 million for the sellers, 38 million for the buyers though, so that's the biggest margin between sellers and buyers. And we do have the most sell orders in the last 24 hours here as well, so that one is probably gonna normalize on the 40 million ISK range as well. And right now, okay, that's my read on this tactical destroyer market. We got a nice little bump in volumes across the board because of the proving grounds probably, but very, very easily absorbed by this market. And right now Hecate seems to be super popular because people are willing to pay that premium for a decently long time, despite the fact that we don't see that big of a volume spike on this one. So Hecate seems to be ruling right now. If you want that premium, try to produce them. Then we have our cruisers with the Legion, alright, taking off to 180 million, but already back down to 170. So this to me is that gambling aspect. I think that you have a much better chance in the destroyers of maintaining a price range and of being able to say, okay, the Zwepel was lagging behind so much. We got these volume changes, Zwepel is going up, and then you had a nice chance to sell, and you can still sell at a nice premium on the Zwepel for now, for instance. But the Legion, I can never tell. Is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? I've got no idea. The volumes just aren't there in general. And so now we had another nice jump up to above 180 million. High point is in fact 190 million ISK. And just look at how quickly that gap is plugged down to 170 and 158 for the buyers. I just don't have a good read on this market, because then what happens? The Loki does the exact opposite. It went up to 200 million about 10 to 15 days ago, and now it's already just moving its way back down steadily. 178 for the sellers, 166 for the buyers. Then we have the Proteus, normally considered to be the weakest one, that actually now has a double top at 180. Is working its way back down to the 150 range. Yeah, 159 for the sellers, 145 already for the buyers. And finally Tengu, which I would consider to be a more stable platform because it's PvE related in general. I think it's a very nice one that's able to maintain a nice premium above 180. 187 for the sellers, 170 for the buyers. That one is not going anywhere. So, and I don't have an explanation, right? We've got a massive jump, a downwards, we get a double top, and then here in Tengu we basically have a maintained premium pretty easily. All different things, and none of them were like expected or predictable or something like that. And this really does show that big difference, in my opinion, between the tactical destroyer market that does have a little bit more logic in it, that is a little bit more predictable, and you can still right now sell those Lokis for probably 42-43 million. You'll get that sale immediately, and just a month ago, right, when things were happening, Confessor was starting to go back up here. We had the Hecate spike that was still to be absorbed. The Jackdaw was starting to go back up. This is where I was saying, Zvepel, that looks interesting. That could definitely, go up in price. And you were able to buy these at like probably 32-33 million. So you get a nice premium right now. But you can at least sell them, right? Legion, you could sell them probably a day ago at that nice price. But look at how quickly all of this gets filled in. This to me feels a lot more like there is manipulation happening here rather than regular market forces. Very interesting stuff, but also kind of crazy, of course. And so I would dare to make bigger investments of several ships in the destroyers when it comes to these cruisers. Well, I actually have a Loki that I bought at 150. I've got a Legion that I bought at 135. But, I'll see if I want to sell it. Part of me also said, these are great ships. I can't fly them yet. I'm training into them. And so perhaps I'll just keep it. I bought a super cheap Legion. So flying that one won't feel as bad as losing like a 180 million or something like that ship either. So I'm not sure what I want to do with these. Perhaps I want to fly them, and that was really always my my take here. I'm taking that gamble, but it's not necessarily a gamble in the sense that I would like to fly these ships one day. So then I've got the hull ready to go when I finally trained into them. And that leaves us with the extra product for the week, which is going to be frigates and faction frigates coming in at 5630. Like that. And as always, we will start with the pirate factions. So here is the Astero for solo exploration going into wormhole space. This is a great ship, right? Covered ups, capable, nice bonuses to all of that probing and data relic stuff. It's actually close to a 1-year low point at the moment, going for 55 million for the sellers, less than 50 million for the buyers. Nice and cheap, definitely affordable for, I would say, a great ship to have. Perhaps something that I should even put into my Orca as well, to give me some wormhole adventure options. Now that I think about it, I have one ready in a Mars space. Perhaps I'll go and grab it and put it into the Orca, because there's a possibility for that. It can even PvP against some smaller guys as well, having 5 small drones, so could be interesting. Next up here we've got the Crewer, big volume spike, but actually driving the price down. Really? Are we talking 40 million for the sellers, 32.5 million for the buyers, and a volume spike? Well, it is up to 75 ships, so it's not that great, but it's basically under pressure, below average. I would say 40 million right here, selling just below average. Next up here we've got the Daredevil that is still able to maintain a decent price compared to the previous one. 64 million for the sellers, 58 million for the buyers. Definitely a much more narrow margin. Alright, next up we've got the Dramiel 1 year low point. Okay, 35 million for the sellers, 33 million for the buyers. Honestly, if you don't have a Dramiel, it's a super fast chip. I love it myself to move more expensive stuff. That started out towards the wrong word, but more expensive stuff like the loot that I find from exploration, and then BPCs of course as well. I actually tend to use the Dramiel for that as a transport chip, and right now you're buying it for a very cheap price. The Garmer, 50 million, decently affordable, slightly below average. Yeah, 50 for the sellers, 45 million for the buyers. Definitely a ship that I should look into at some point as well. I have never owned or flown a Garmer. It looks unique, it's very cool. I think it's gonna be able to do shields with missiles pretty well. Let's see if it has drones. It does not have drones, I think. No, so it is a pure missile ship, but it's very cool. I've never owned one or flown it, so I'll probably do that at some point as well. Perhaps looking into that together with an Astero. Then we've got a Succubus that is still going for above 40 million, but definitely on the low end of the range as well. 42 to 38 million. And then finally the Worm, that is actually slightly up in price, but still below average as well. 58 million for the sellers and 52 million for the buyers. It's basically the Gila of the frigates, very good and very strong into the abyss as well, which is why you're paying a little bit of a premium, but pirate faction frigates, very affordable at the moment. Navy faction ships, let's take a look at that. Here is to look for Griffin Navy issue, which is down here. Okay, let's start with the Caldari Navy Hookbill. Relative to the price range, of course, it's pretty cheap compared to the pirate faction ships, but right now it's actually hovering at a high point for its range. 14 million almost for the sellers, 12 million for the buyers, so pretty expensive at the moment. Federation Navy Comet is the reverse, actually at the low end of its range for 10 million ISK, 11 for the sellers, less than 10 million for the buyers. This is something we have not seen in a very long time. Galente ship cheap, so that ought to mean cheap and plentiful loyalty points. Caldari ship expensive, which ought to mean expensive loyalty points there. That's interesting. We haven't seen that in a long time. And does this mean that this is a market opportunity? Try to grab some cheap Federation Navy Comets, and if things turn around, try to sell them then. That is of course difficult to say at this point. But it's possible. Let's see what happens then with Mar versus Minmatar. Here is the Imperial Navy Slicer, and I actually have to drink a little bit. Like that. Imperial Navy Slicer definitely on the cheap end as well. 7.5 million, almost on the chart. 10 million for the sellers, 7.8 million for the buyers. Republic Fleet Firetail, okay, not super pronounced, but definitely at the higher end of the range. 13 for the sellers, 9.5 million for the buyers. So it's not as pronounced as the Caldari Navy Hookbill compared to the Navy Comet, but it's slightly there as well. Next up here, the Skybreaker. What's that ship costing now? 70 million for the sellers. Availability is not great, 61 million. Definitely decently affordable, although for a Navy faction ship, of course, still very expensive. Crucifier Navy issue, definitely at the cheap end of the range as well. Buyers coming in at 9.7, sellers at 12 million. And then we have our Griffin Navy issue. Okay, that did look like a response to the announcement, up to 20 million ISK. Already back down to 16.7, 16, yeah, buyers very aggressive here as well. So it looks like the rebalance was very nice for the Griffin Navy issue, and this one was high as well. So it's right now, I would say, like the most expensive of the regular Navy faction ships, going for over 20 million ISK. Very nice premium. Perhaps this is also, you know, taking in some loyalty points, which is why the Navy Hookbill is able to stay this high for this long now. And then finally we got the Maulus Navy issue. That's confirming that trend again. Galente on the cheap side. Caldari definitely expensive. And finally we have our Vigil fleet issue. Less clear of a picture in the Minmatar ship range. Ooh, 30 million for the sellers and 15 million for the buyers. Let's see if there are sellers in. Nope, that's 10 jumps out. Okay, man, that is, you could, if you buy one here and then sell one here, you already have a super nice trade. That's not gonna last too long. Expect the gap to be plugged, basically. It's down to 20 million. Or maybe, are they like a similar thing between the Vigil and the Griffin? And so I think we would have seen, well, we do have volume spike here. Let me know in the comments if the Vigil also got a change. That would basically be my read on what's happening in the price of the Vigil fleet issue here. But across the board here, very interesting in the sense that we have this Caldari high, Galente low that is confirmed in basically both of the options for these Navy faction frigates. Something we haven't seen in a long time, and maybe an opportunity for trade. Who knows? We will keep an eye on all of that and maybe do some more faction stuff from time to time to see if that pattern is re-emerging. That is going to be it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.